Imagine what it would be like if there were no bridges to cross your local river with, or no clean water in your town. While people in developed countries take such things for granted, billions of others around the world can't. Hello, and welcome to CU Science Update. I'm your host, Tasha Eichenseher. The construction of roads, bridges, and water projects improve our quality of life. They afford convenience, progress, and economic growth. In the United States, when we think engineering, we think big. The Empire State Building, the Hoover Dam, or Golden Gate Bridge. But projects don't have to be huge to have a huge impact on people's lives. A bridge in a small town in El Salvador can mean access to markets, schools, and clean water. Projects to treat wastewater improve health and sanitation, and save lives. According to the World Health Organization, close to 2 million people die every year from waterborne illnesses. Most of these fatalities are in the developing world, where more children die each year from diarrhea than die from AIDS, malaria, and measles combined. Organizations such as Engineers Without Borders USA and Bridges to Prosperity were founded in response to these realities. Both nonprofits are based in Boulder, Colorado, and draw on today's growing humanitarian impulse to create a core of engineering activists hoping to build a better world. Professor Bernard Amadei founded Engineers Without Borders. He calls it engineering with a human face. CU Science Update joins one of Professor Amadei's classes at CU. And we talk with students who are entering the ranks of a new generation of engineers.
Here at the main engineering complex at CU Boulder, you'll find the Mortensen Center in Engineering for Developing Communities.
Like other engineering programs, the Mortensen Center teaches important skills and innovation in science and math. But what makes it unique is how it teaches students to apply these skills to the real world.
Students don't come to the Mortensen Center to learn to create huge civil engineering projects. Instead, students come here to learn the skills that they will use to build basic infrastructure in developing communities. The Mortensen Center is directed by Professor Bernard Amadei. Professor Amadei is well known for his work in sustainable engineering and global development. Inspired by a trip to a small village in Belize in desperate need of water, Amadei co-founded Engineers Without Borders USA in 2002. Since then, the organization has expanded its reach across the globe. Professor Amadei uses his field experience from Engineers Without Borders in teaching. Classes at the Mortensen Center emphasize practical engineering. Amadei stresses the importance of considering the community in all engineering projects. Students learn to deal with engineering problems that are very different than what they're used to.
In engineering, you're usually taught the latest and greatest technology and how to apply it in this industrial, very high-tech manner. And here it goes back to what is appropriate technology, what is appropriate to implement, and what are the true needs that people have.
The Mortensen Center's guiding principle is the meaningful education of engineers. Former student Avery Bang is an example of how this can translate into a career in engineering. Bang is the executive director of Bridges to Prosperity, a nonprofit in Boulder that constructs bridges in developing communities.
My leadership within Bridges to Prosperity is directly aligned with Bernard's support and encouragement, and he had a lot of experience with Engineers Without Borders, and that's certainly been a huge success, and they've gone on to big things. And he saw me and my little fledgling interest in a different but similar organization, and I think he really has been influential in just kind of supporting me personally and the organization to think outside the box.
Bridges to Prosperity creates footbridges over impassable rivers to increase access to isolated communities. Working with the community is key to ensuring the bridge's success.
Mostly it's just putting the skills I have, putting different people's skills to work together on the same path. They typically have the ability to build anything we want to build. It's just getting everybody with the right skill set aligned.
Local skills such as masonry and carpentry are essential resources for a bridge's construction. This requires working closely with the community's leaders to organize dates, crews, and materials. Bridges to Prosperity uses a program manager in every country they work in to orchestrate this cooperation. The program manager lives and works in the community for several months to years. We were able to speak via Skype to the program manager for Bolivia. Neda Ophir worked as an industrial engineer in Israel for 15 years prior to her work with global development. Ophir spoke with us from Cochabamba, Bolivia, about the role Bridges to Prosperity plays in the community.
We come into the community, we work with the people for a very defined amount of time, but we do not presume to know better for them how to lead their day-to-day life. It's not the bridges we built, it's not the bridges I built, definitely, it's the bridges they built. The bridge is made only from local materials. So it means collecting stones in the river, it means mixing cement manually, that I don't know if you try doing, but it's not easy at all. It makes you appreciate a lot of things that before I took for granted. It makes me appreciate a lot of things that before I took for granted, like, turning the tap and having running water, like brushing my teeth every morning and every night before I go to bed. It's not obvious for these people to brush their teeth because in order to get water, sometimes they need to, walk to the river, which can be 2 hours from their village. On the other hand, it makes you understand how much beauty there is in simplicity. How many of the things that we need and we desire, we put as a necessity for our happiness, are not really that important, and that simplicity can be very beautiful. Relationship between people in a community in Bolivia is nothing I've ever had with my neighbors in Tel Aviv.
Ophir is not alone in her sentiment. It's not difficult to find reasons why people want to work in engineering for developing communities.
Just crunching numbers behind a desk for a big corporation didn't really seem fitting, so I decided to go a separate route and actually make a difference on other people's lives. I'm very lucky and I have everything I need, and not everybody's just as lucky. So,
Engineers Without Borders, the Mortensen Center, and Bridges to Prosperity all continue to attract students and volunteers to help continue their projects throughout the world. For CU Science Update, I'm Lucia Palmer.
Amadei founded Engineers Without Borders after visiting the small village of San Pablo in northern Belize in 2000. This village of fewer than 1,000 people had no electricity, no running water, and no way to treat wastewater. Amadei was deeply moved at the sight of children carrying water all day from a nearby river. He later returned to San Pablo with 8 University of Colorado students and a civil engineering expert. Together with local residents, the team installed a clean water system powered by a small waterfall. The entire project cost $14,000. It was simple, sustainable, and low cost. Amadei realized that professional and student engineers working together could create similar low-tech, high-impact projects in other developing countries. Since its inception in 2002, Engineers Without Borders has grown from 9 volunteers to an organization of more than 12,000 engineering students, faculty, and professionals. They have worked on 350 projects in 45 developing countries, helping to improve the lives of millions of people. By using local materials and local know-how, engineers leave communities with projects that they can maintain and operate long after engineering teams have gone home. Professor Amadei explains the importance of small-scale engineering and how working in the developing world requires a different approach.
And what is the role of engineering in society, in your view now? How has your view changed on that?
Well, the way I look at engineering today, based on my own experience now over the past 10 years, where I have traveled the world and working on small community projects, I think my view of engineering is of being of service, especially the type of engineering that I teach and I practice, which is civil engineering. I mean, the idea of being of service to the world. And the type of engineering that I see today is, I would call engineering with a human face, engineering with heart. Yes, you need to bring your brain and your mind into making intelligent and good engineering decisions. But you also need to take people, the environment under consideration. And that's rarely done in engineering, to be frank. Traditional approach to engineering is, well, if brute force does not work, try harder. Well, it probably worked out very well in using that type of technology, if brute force does not work, try harder, probably that approach worked very well in building the pyramids and building the Panama Canal and the Suez Canal and the large civil works that we see today. But this is the only option that we have about engineering. What about practicing engineering for the 5 billion people on the planet whose job is to try to stay alive by the end of the day, whose basic needs are water, sanitation, energy, shelter, telecommunication, health, transportation, who 1 billion of them make less than $1 a day, 2 billion of them make less than $2 a day, and you have 5 billion of them making less than $10 a day. So what kind of engineering are we going to develop?
These are small projects, typically, much smaller than you would see in a developed country. How is it different designing and implementing a project on such a small scale in a developing country as opposed to in the developing world?
10 years ago, my emphasis was on large projects. Then, following a trip to Belize in 2001 and the creation of Engineers Without Borders in the United States, I switched over to practicing engineering for small communities. 500,000 people, 2,000 people, and there's plenty of those small communities around the world. How does engineering for the other 90% look like? Well, it's the same. The fundamentals are the same. I mean, you still need statics and dynamics and strengths of materials and electrical circuits and what have you there. The fundamentals are the same. The implementation is different.
The science is the same. The people who are working on those projects need that background in science that
Absolutely.
they get in engineering schools.
Absolutely.
But they're applying them in different ways.
Absolutely.
now.
The implementation is completely different.
How do these projects change the lives of the people in those communities?
It's an interesting question, because the approach here of doing engineering in a small village, say at the middle of Africa, is a bit different. Instead of, say, the white man coming over and telling the locals how to do things, which has been the traditional approach since World War II, and it's still the approach in some cases. The approach here is a bit different. It's what we would call a participatory type of approach, more integrated type of approach in design, where you start with the community, you do a thorough appraisal with the community, empowering the community. You identify the problems with the community. You identify some potential solutions with the community that best match the level of the capacity of the community to handle. You strengthen that capacity so that people can make some changes. And then the projects are done in the community, monitored and evaluated by the community with assistance from the outside. And that's a bit different from, say, coming into a community and say, hey, guys, you need a water well. I'm going to build it for you. Goodbye. Well, 60% of most water systems that are installed in the world by some people with good intentions and mostly from the world of charity fail after 6 months. In some countries, it can be as high as 80% to 90%. That's what I would call bad engineering or inappropriate type of engineering. Usually it's done by non-engineers, by people who mean well. They do mean well. Let's save those poor people in Africa, let's give them water. But they don't understand that putting a well into the village may have some impact. Some of it obviously is going to be positive, and some of it might actually be negative if it's not well, if the project is not well thought of.
We've been talking about the projects and the people in those communities. What about the engineers who are working on those projects? The students you see, the volunteers you see. How does this work change them?
We have a lot of young people who are coming to our program after spending some time on either in the Peace Corps or in the various chapters of Engineers Without Borders across the United States, who want to do a career in that kind of engineering. There's a huge demand among the young people today for being engaged in that kind of work. And I've noticed that trend over the past 10 years. Since 2001, many young people are interested in doing something very meaningful. Yes, having a career, in our case engineering, but a meaningful career.
Bridges, water, and energy projects. They help connect people to a better life. And they are all connected at CU Boulder, where science is turning humanitarian dreams into reality. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you, and join us again for another edition of CU Science Update.
CU Science Update is produced by University of Colorado at Boulder, Journalism and Mass Communication. To download this episode and others from CU Science Update, visit the podcast section of the iTunes Store. Or you can visit our website at cuscienceupdate.com. Finally, don't forget to like us on our Facebook page, where we post the latest in science happening in Boulder and beyond.